every guy should have 2 leather jackets in his rotation for travel, for casual, and just to have something different from your typical formal wool. A black and a red would be my recommendation, or a dark blue. But this is a very special leather jacket. Dan, tell us about this leather jacket.
Well, this is a Bruce Lee lining leather jacket. Well, it's got a Bruce Lee photo right there.
Why is Bruce Lee somebody that you look up to?
Well, because when I first moved to Vancouver, I was getting bullied right in high school. I was one of the only 3 Chinese in my school. So I was getting beat up, getting bullied, getting, just almost every day. And one day I was watching cable TV. Return of the Dragon came up, which is Bruce Lee with Chuck Norris. He's in Rome. He's a guy who couldn't speak a word of English and just kicking all the bad guys' ass, right? So I kind of fell in love with, oh my God, this is a hero. This is like exactly what I'm going through. And that's when I became a kind of a martial art buff, right? Went to karate school and all that stuff. So since then, he's always been a hero. But more than just watching the movies, later on, I've had the privilege to study under 2 of Bruce Lee's original students, Sifu Joe Louis and Sifu Ted Wong. And I've studied a lot of Bruce Lee's work. I actually have a pretty big Bruce Lee collection at home, like his work and stuff. I have one of his original Bruce Lee has used like a barbells at my home.
Wow.
Used to display in the Hong Kong Museum for many, many years. And I bought that. So like I'm a huge fan. And Bruce Lee not only a great martial artist, but back then, so many years ago, he was kind of like a fashion icon too.
Right.
He was always dressing very well back in the day.
And he wore a lot of suits, and that was something people forget. Bruce Lee was a big suit guy.
Yes. High heels. Right. And he's kicking in the suits, and he also has a leather jacket as well. So back then, it was very, very trendy, right?
So let's say Bruce Lee is like one of your mentors you never got to meet.
Yes.
What would you say if you met him?
Wow. I would say, I would probably say, hey, I'll hold something, hit it, man, hit it. I want to feel the power.
Yeah.
And I would say he changed my life. Love it.
So just by his example and just by the way that he lived and the way that he pushed the boundaries.
Yeah, because I've studied his philosophies and a lot of the books and a lot of work. I've probably spent a decade studying it.
What are some philosophies that just come right to the top of your mind that you think all young people should look into?
Well, one of his philosophies, I could give you 2. He said, is having no way as the way and having no limitation as limitation. I love that.
That's abundance thinking right there.
Yeah, I love that. So
I want to pause on that. The having no way as the way, it's so interesting. It's like, don't focus so much on the process, focus more on the result.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, that's really what it's saying to me.
Yeah, because his martial art, it's a combination of different arts.
Yeah.
Now, right now, today, we have MMA, mixed martial art. But back then, you don't have that. You have karate, and you have taekwondo, you have judo. So he was the kind of the father of MMA, the first one to say, hey, I can learn something from boxing. I can learn something from fencing. I can learn something from this. I could train like an athlete and put that all together, and no one has ever done that before. So he was the one that kind of pioneered that. So that would be one of them, one of the philosophies. Another quote I love, it's a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
See if you would get it. He said this. He said, before I learned the art, a punch is just a punch, a kick is just a kick. He said, after I learned the art, a punch is no longer a punch, a kick is no longer a kick. Now, when I truly understand the art, a punch is still a punch, and a kick is still a kick. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Now, and you can take that and you can interpret in whatever meanings, but it took me many years to understand what the heck does he mean. But
well, to me that goes back to that other Bruce Lee quote is, do not fear the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks.
That's right.
Fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. And then is the kick really a kick when you practice it 10,000? It's no longer just a kick.
It's a master.
It's a master. Yeah, and that's something that we talk about in our sales organization a lot, because people are always trying to think outside the box. And I'm like, stop that. Like, I understand you want to contribute and put your stamp on something. You're not ready. Like, before you learn to think outside the box, learn to dominate the damn box. Like, salespeople are like, how do I have the biggest package size? How do I do this fancy slam dunk? I'm like, do you know how to dribble?
Yeah.
Like, do you know, and Lennox Lewis and I have had this conversation. He talks about, he actually has this as one of his quotes. It's like, everyone wants to put their personal stamp on something, but they need to learn the fundamentals and be the best at those.
Yeah.
And one example, I've had this conversation with Lennox Lewis, the last undisputed world heavyweight champion, is he says, look, you're learning in boxing, like, you need to jab. You never lead with an uppercut, right? Why not? Well, because you're going to get your nose broke. Like, if you're leading with an uppercut, you're going to... But when you look at some of the best, like you see Ali or Roy Jones, they would lead with an uppercut because their jab was so good and so dangerous that they could do these tricky things. And that's what Bruce Lee talked about. Like, do not fear the man who practiced 10,000 kicks. Fear the one... Some of the best salespeople in our organization, they're not charismatic. They're not socially intelligent anywhere above average, if that. But they're just so darn good at executing the basics. Like, they pick up the phone, they say what they need to say, and they close the deal. And it's like and it becomes a science. And then it's like, man, your approach is not just an approach. That is a work of art.
Yes.
And that's something a lot of salespeople miss. They're looking for that magic bullet. There's no magic bullet. You have to master the fundamentals.
No. And I have so many stories. I'll share one with you about Bruce Lee. And these stories you don't hear from the movies, because these are stories more from, like, people that know him or in my seafood and stuff like. Also because my mentor, Ted Wong, is the only one that has a lot of photos you see Bruce Lee training in his backyard. Most of the time, 9 out of 10, the ones that are holding the pad getting punched is Ted.
Okay.
Right? So he spent the most time with Bruce, more than anybody else. And so one of the things he shared with me is, he said one time he was, I think it was either in Los Angeles or Oakland, I forgot. Bruce got a school in there. And it's basement, he's walking downstairs, so there's a heavy bag, right? It's probably 100 pounds. And then as I was walking downstairs, I hear this boom, boom, right? And then he walks in and Bruce is kicking the bag. Like, just bam, with his side kick, right?
Yeah.
Just kicking it back. And said what he was doing is, this is the bag, right? So Bruce would kick it, and then he would send the bag to the ceiling. Like, like that, right? And then the bag would hit the ceiling, right? And then coming down, and he would, without jumping, stay in the same spot, and bam, and boom, send it back to the ceiling again, right? Like, this is a lot
of power.
Yeah,
sure.
And he's 140 pounds, right? Like, that kind of stuff. But that's how much power that he has. So a lot of these little stories, but why? Because he practiced that kick thousands and thousands of times.
So what is that thing in sales that you think is that kick or that punch, that first fundamental thing you have to practice thousands of times to get so good at it that becomes your competitor? It's no longer just a kick or a punch.
I would say it's asking questions. Like with the script that I teach, that I use, I don't use like a long 6, 7, 8 page script. My script is like 1 page with a set of questions. That's it. That's the punch, right?
Yeah.
You look at like a champion boxer versus an amateur boxer.
Sure.
Right? In boxing, you have jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Yeah. The world champion throws 4 punches.
Right.
Amateur throws 4 punches.
Right.
What is the difference?
Well, the difference is the professional actually, it's more than a punch.
That's right. They've got power, they've got speed, they've got reflexes, they've got all the experience, but the moves are the same. So the great salesperson versus an amateur salesperson, they kind of do the same thing. That you have the moves, you have the script, but then they have mastered the script so well.
There's a quote that I really like. It says and this martial arts quote is that the amateur has 1,000 ways of doing something.
That's right.
And the professional is 1, maybe 2.
1.
Maybe
like
even
I
1.
have, I have 1 closing statement.
That's it.
That's it. I don't have, like in sales, a lot of people say, 57 ways to close somebody.
No.
You use the puppy dog close, the Franklin close, and all this close. I mean, no, I don't have any of those. I have 1. Because you just get so darn good at it, and you just do that.
Well, and if you have to have 57 closes, there's probably some other problems in your. If you're closing 57 different ways, there's some other problems in your cycle, right? Like
Bruce later on, before he passed away at 32, really his art has been so simple that he pretty much has like 3 or 4 techniques.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a lot of techniques. He's got a finger jab, right? Because what we learn, it's eyes, throat, groin, and knees.
Right.
Right? So he's got his side kick, he's got his finger jab, he's got, his punch. That's about it. But it's unstoppable.
Right.
He's done it so many times.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take your eyes, I'm gonna take your eyes. I don't need so many things.
When I think about that in sales, for me, that's your approach. Like if you're good at prospecting, if your approach, like on the sales cycle, if your approach is unstoppable, it's like, one of the things people said, it's like, I remember.
It makes everything else work.
Yeah, my first sales month in our business, I think I had 152 appointments. I only closed 56, which was a very low closing rate, but I got 56 clients, which is more than most people ever had anywhere near in a month. And they were like, this is crazy. How did you do it? And I was like, well, I just put myself in front of as many qualified people as I could. Now, they weren't all qualified because I had a lot to learn. But the thing was, like, if my sales approach is good, like, you might know more about the product. You might know more fancy selling techniques. You might know everything that I don't know.
You get more volume.
But I'm in front of more. The fundamental in sales is being in front of a qualified person.
Yeah.
I put myself in front of more qualified people. So what I teach my salespeople is like, look, you will learn the close. You will learn this. You'll learn that. Product knowledge is good to have, but it's not number one. The number one thing in sales is you want to be in front of as many qualified people as possible. That's what we fight for every day, to be in front of qualified people.
Yeah.
Now, some salespeople come in, they're like, well, I know the most about the product. Okay, and who are you telling it to?
It doesn't matter.
Are you telling it to the mirror? It doesn't matter because you don't have people to tell it to. You need to get in front of people. So for me, that jab, the fundamental in sales, is you got to have the best approach where you can get in front of people.
Yeah.
Well, to do that, you need a pretty good schedule. You need, good circadian cycles. You need to be waking up on time. You need to have a routine in your day to lower your neurological anxiety response. Like just that sleep schedule is the very, very basics. The greatest. And I remember, what was it, Lombardi? He had this thing where like before every football game, he would hold up the football and say, gentlemen, this is a football. And it was just bringing people right back to the very fundamentals, the very basics. And so much about, sales coaching and building a sales team is like,
you will never meet a master who doesn't do the basics.
Yeah, of course.
It doesn't do the fundamentals. A master is simply someone who's done the fundamentals thousands and thousands of times. That's it. Like the same thing.
Very good.
Yeah, same thing one day.
I want to bring up something from a sales perspective is a lot of times, and I've watched some of your training on this, is salespeople focus a lot on answering objections, which, by the way, if you're getting objections, you have some other issues you need to address in sales. Usually an objection is just a lack of status in your approach. That's all it is. It's an objection is like, I don't trust you because you're not an expert. So your status imitation, your status signals are wrong in your approach. That's where objections come from. But there's something worse than an objection, and that's an excuse, which is so low on the totem pole that if people are giving you excuses, you need to start your sales training from the beginning. Excuses are things like, I'm not interested. So if you call a prospect, you tell them, they're like, I'm not interested, or I'm busy, or I'm in a meeting, or call me back. If they say something to get rid of you on the phone without outright stating what your product or service is, then they never listened to what you were selling to begin with.
Yes.
And why that happens? Because you have low status. Hi, how are you, Dan? Boom, I'm already checked out. So by the time I get to my pitch, you're like, I'm not interested. So I know how to handle an excuse. And I'll tell you guys how I handle an excuse in sales. If somebody gives you an answer that does not explicitly state, they don't say something like, let's say you're selling sales training. I don't want sales training. I don't need sales training. I have sales training. In my case, it's suits. I don't want suits. I don't need suits. I have somebody that makes my suits. But if they give you an answer that does not include the product, so they say, I'm not interested, I'm in a meeting, call me back, and they don't include the product you're selling, I guarantee you they never listen to what you're selling. So what you need to do is just, how do you handle an excuse? You back up and you tell them again what you're selling. So somebody's like, I'm not interested. And I'll say, Dan, let me back up. I sell suits and shirts. And they'll say, yeah, but I don't want anything like that. Did they mention the product? No. So I'll say, Dan, I'm doing a poor job explaining why I called. I sell suits and I sell shirts. And then I'll keep repeating that until he's like, oh, suits and shirts. No, I don't want that. But now that he's acknowledged what I'm selling, I have moved them from excuse to objection. And I can handle objection, but I cannot answer an excuse. Because if you try to close or answer an excuse, what do you get?
No, you're going in circle.
In a circle, just another excuse. Call me back. I'm not interested. Call me back. I'm not interested. So if they don't mention the product in the way they reject you, just repeat what you're selling. It's the simplest thing. Now, objections, you have to learn how to handle objections in your business and, how to overcome specific objections. But the other thing people confuse, I'm not going to cover objections here, but the other thing people confuse with objections, the one thing is excuses. The other one is negotiation. And negotiations, they say like, oh, what color can I get it in? That's not an objection. That's a negotiation. And what do you do when you hear negotiation? You close.
Close the
You
sale.
always close on a negotiation. So it's
They
like,
say, oh, can you get this done in 4 weeks instead of 6 weeks?
okay,
Yeah.
do you want to sign here so we can get it started right away? Right away, you close on a negotiation. So guys, remember, a negotiation is not an objection. The difference is, on a negotiation, they ask you about the terms of delivery or the terms of the product. In our business, it's like, oh, where are your suits made? Boom, that's a negotiation. I go, can you open your calendar? Let's book a meeting right now and I'll tell you. And it's like, boom, and you close, because when they're negotiating, it's like, oh, how much is the price? That's a signal to close. And you might not believe that, but that's a signal to close. That's an interest statement. Objection would be like, it's too expensive or something like that. So remember, guys, excuse, they just tell you to go away without stating the product. I'm not interested, call me back, just something stupid and generic. Negotiation, they ask you about the terms of the product or delivery. And an objection is, they are interested, but they give you some specific reason why they might not buy from you. Handling objections is a whole other story, and I got lots of tips for that in a different time.